that resale value tops $2 trillion a year. So there's an enormous amount of monetary value being literally thrown into landfills every single year. So that to me presents an opportunity. There's a way to figure this one out and get that going.
Welcome to Chain Reaction, the podcast for the supply chain and logistics industry. If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Chain Reaction podcast. I'm Michael, CEO of Flox Logistics Marketplace. The podcast is brought to you by Flox as a way to engage with logistics and supply chain professionals to explore ideas, people, innovations that's shaping the industry. Before we jump in, as a quick reminder to everyone, please subscribe to the channel for the ones who haven't. It really helps us to reach wider audience, grow the channel, and bring the conversations that we're having to people who would be very, very interested and interested in getting the insights. My guest today is John Atcheson. He is a co-founder and CEO of Circularity, a company that brings circular retail models to life. John, great to have you with us.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being a great for being a guest today. But I'd like to start our conversation with kind of in somewhat a typical way. So I'd like to start with what really sits at the heart of your work. You have been deeply involved in the circular economy and sustainability space for quite some time. And how did your passion kind of develop? And what is it? What drew you into building the business around this kind of the circular and regenerative models?
Sure. So, I mean, my background is all in kind of venture-backed tech startups. Most of it was in Silicon Valley or back and forth between Silicon Valley and Seattle. And originally, my focus was on media technology, and then I was able to take some time off, kind of mid-career, and and I'd done some studies around sustainability and renewable energy when I was at university. And it gave me a chance to say, all right, I want to rededicate myself to this. I want to get back into this and really dig in deeply. And so I ended up joining a think tank on the west coast of the US called Sightline Institute that focuses on kind of systemic changes that can be made to drive everything more towards sustainability. So Sightline, for example, was behind the British Columbia carbon tax and kind of working the policy angles on that. So a very kind of wonky, high-level organization. And I got deeply involved, became the board chair there for several years. And then just started looking at how to kind of merge my passion for sustainability with my passion for entrepreneurship, and technology, and all of that. And so I helped to launch a company called Get Around, which was a pioneer in the idea of peer-to-peer car sharing, kind of Airbnb for cars. And that was really my first foray into this idea of using technological innovation to try to extend the use of products, because cars are terrible, right? Cars, all these resources go into building a car, and then they just sit doing nothing for 22 hours a day. Um, and so, so Get Around began to grow. We raised a bunch of money. Company ultimately went on to go public. But before that even happened, I started looking at all the other things we buy and what happens to those things and what that system really looks like. And it was just so disturbing to me to really look at what was truly going on. And it's a crazy, crazy system we have today. If you walk into just go into a department store, right? So you walk into any department store and you look around and you look at the clothing section and the electronics section, the furniture section, and all that. Just keep in mind that 80 to 90%, statistically, 80 to 90% of everything you see in that store will be in landfill within about 3 years, which is just astonishing, right? And obviously that you can kind of imagine the environmental impact of all of that. But there's also an incredible kind of commercial angle to this, which is that the value of the consumer products that we bury in landfill every year, if you were to resell those, so the current market value, not the original value, but the current market value for resale of the things getting buried, because so many of them are still usable. Um, that resale value tops $2 trillion a year. So there's an enormous amount of monetary value being literally thrown in landfills every single year. So that to me presents an opportunity. There's a way to figure this one out and get that going. And that's what ultimately led to the formation of the Circular Way. And Circular Way is really we're reimagining the entire retail experience to create a fully closed loop system so that everything that's purchased is purchased with the understanding that as soon as you're done using it, you can simply push a button and you will get that will be bought back by the retailer at whatever the market value of that item is, at no effort on your part whatsoever. Essentially, you can use your previous purchases as real-time currency. So I could even go to the checkout screen and instead of using a credit card, I just have images of all the previous purchases and I can say, well, I'm not using this, this, and this, and those in real time will pay for the new item um, and bring everything back in that way. And then when things come back into our system, the first priority is to try to refurbish them and get them back out there and still, keep them in their current form and make them usable again and resell those things. And if they can't be resold, if it doesn't make economic sense to fix them back up, then we know exactly what they are, we know what material they're made of, and we can then take them to be reprocessed and turned into new materials to be made into new products. So that's kind of the big picture of what we're doing.
This is very interesting. Well, first of all, absolutely shocking number. I've never heard the number before, and that number is definitely now sits at like lives rent free in my head with 2 trillion. I mean, it's a massive market. It's absolutely huge. But that's interesting because can we talk maybe a little bit? Yes, you've spoken about the circular way. Can you just give a little bit of a kind of your view on how and where does the whole thing sits? Because there are lots of terms around circular economy, which may mean slightly different things to different people. There is a recycling side of things that is also that we also everybody kind of well people are talking about so recycling, but essentially something goes to landfill, something goes into reprocessing. There is a second-hand market where you have the places like the eBays or Gumtrees and whatnot, where people kind of individually doing something that way. What you are talking about, at least the way that it sounds to me, is kind of industrializing that process a little bit better, so you can get a more professional way of handling this and channeling the kind of returned, whether they use or they just returned or refused or brand new, whatever that may be. So can you maybe elaborate on maybe segments or sub-segments of all these things that are happening and how the whole kind of ecosystem works? Because I mean, we are as humans, we are in a consumption society, for better or worse, and that is unfortunately the problem. We out of sight, out of mind, and we just return the item or throw it out and so forth, and we never think about what is happening in the afterlife. And but apparently it's a humongous value that is either being wasted or being leveraged. So can you just give a bit of a flavor on that, please?
Sure. I mean, circularity is kind of in danger of jumping from a term that nobody knows into a term that nobody understands because it's so overused and misused. Um, but there are many different things going on out there that improve the sustainability of certain aspects of the system. I would say resale is a great example, right? Just having a little, a charity shop that people donate clothes to and they sort through them and they say, let's resell some of these. That's certainly a more sustainable way for things to happen, but it's not a circular way for things to happen. A circular way for things to happen is, in the ultimate sense, it is an entire system. It's where products are designed to be circular, meaning that they are made of materials that can be reprocessed. They're manufactured in a way that can be easily disassembled, economically, efficiently disassembled. There's tremendous thought that goes into the creation of the products to be in a system where those products are going to ultimately come back and then be regenerated. And the whole idea of, and just I guess to make one distinction, the idea of recycling is certainly a part of circularity, but it's the kind of least desirable part of circularity. the core concept in circularity is to keep everything at its maximal value at all times. And if you're just taking a product and then sending it back to be kind of torn apart and then try to get what you can out of the materials in that, that's certainly better than throwing it into landfill. But that's not a very efficient way to actually be maximizing the use of those materials, right? You would much rather have a product that was designed to be durable, designed to be disassemblable, and have that product then repurposed and reused as many times as possible through the entire cycle until it's just you're down to these raw materials, and then those raw materials are kind of predestined to be regenerated and put back in the system. So, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a fantastic organization for anybody who's interested in circularity. They are really kind of the nexus of global circularity, based here in the UK. And they have what they call a butterfly diagram, and it's these loops that kind of come back in. And the innermost loop is to repair something, right? You fix it and you kind of keep it going, and then you start going to further out, and then you have kind of resale, then you have refurbishment and remanufacturing, and then you've got recycling as kind of the outermost loop, and then if it's not in a loop at all, it goes to landfill. And that's a good way to think about circularity. You want to be in the most inner loop you can get to, because you want to keep everything at the highest value possible at every moment in its life cycle.
Talking about kind of supply chain and logistics side of things, so many people will think that kind of the reverse logistics is almost like, well, it's a forward logistics but kind of backwards, uh, and that's an extremely simplistic and probably naive view of things. So could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what it actually means kind of in real life, and maybe use an example of I don't know, a category of products, because well, I mean, we all consumers, and we buy, I don't know, washing machines, for example, that gets collected by the retailer, and then it goes somewhere. I mean, it might not be broken. I just decided to replace it. So, or maybe you can pick another category. So, like, well, how does that reverse return logistics part of things actually works, and what happens kind of behind the scenes?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at the very, very front end of that process, it is a little bit of just a reversal of normal process, in the sense that, you've got trucks out there delivering things every day all over our society. And if you actually get a circular system, then those trucks are going to be using their empty capacity coming back to be hauling things back. and and so they're both dropping things off and picking things up and bringing it back in. And so that aspect of it is almost just kind of it's taking a one-way flow and turning it into a two-way flow within kind of an adapted version of the current system. The big difference is when they get back. And what happens when they get back is very, very different, because you now are trying first and foremost to understand what level of value is still in that product. What does it have? And so you need some kind of grading system, some evaluation that has to take place when something comes in, so that you know what to do with it, what needs to happen next. And then the whole process of refurbishment and getting things ready to be put back up for sale if they still have value in them, that's a pretty new process. There's not, I mean, obviously it exists out there, but it's not anywhere close to the scale that matches the opportunity for circularity. And so that I think has major ramifications for the supply chain in general, because it tends to be much more local. You don't want things to travel too far. You want to be able to kind of get them back, clean them up, at least within a region, within a country, ideally. And so it does have some pretty big differences.
Well, it's quite a lot to unpack here. I mean, you almost like opened the Pandora's box of problems and issues to deal with. I think the biggest one that struck me or strikes me is unless the products that you deal with are very strictly controlled in terms of kind of the categories, you might be you will be dealing with a zoo of stuff that comes in. It could be because when you sell items, you have a SKU, you have a kind of a standardized packaging. Is like you have your model range, you have a limited variability basically. When the stuff comes back, the variability is absolutely massive. Every item is unique because it's been used in a different way. It could be the same brand but a different model, different age, different usage, different level of residual values you describe. And it sounds like there's a lot of problems around, well, how you keep track of those things, how you evaluate what is the residual. There's a technicality in that, quite a lot. The process side of things also involved. What do you do with it? Do you refurbish it? Do you remanufacture it? Do you simply recycle it? Do you what is it? Do you ship it somewhere globally? Because there's lots of choices, and there must be some bottlenecks in the process as well. So can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that side of things? Because it sounds to me like a massive graveyard. There's a tons of people just walking around, and I'm saying, well, okay, well, that goes there. It's like triage in the hospital when, I don't know, an accident in the bus and dozen people comes in, and doctors are going about and say, well, that guy's going into surgery, that guy's going to, I don't know, wait for a couple of hours, and this guy needs a blood transfusion. So like, how does that work? It's fascinating.
Hopefully not quite that dire, but yes. um, yeah, I mean, there's a there's actually a focus right now among governments because governments see this level of waste as a big problem. Um, and governments are beginning to take action on this, mostly through what are called extended producer responsibility laws, EPR schemes, where the producers that put things into the market pay a fee that is then used for what happens to those things at the end of their use so that they don't all end up in landfill. And the classic way that's been done is kind of the way it was done originally with packaging, like bottles and cans and paying a small fee and getting those things back in. And it's been looked at as this kind of big system that needs to be put in place to just convert the whole world into this collection system so that consumers are given directives that, when you're done with something, it needs to go in this certain bin. And if it doesn't go in that bin, you're going to get a fine on it. And then we're going to collect all those bins and we're going to take them back to some usually, multi-million-dollar sorting facility. And in that sorting facility, it's going to be like an emergency room triage operation, right? Things come in and you go, oh my gosh, what is this? Right? Is it usable? What model is it? What does it do? All that kind of thing. And that's actually a really inefficient way to try to be circular and try to solve this problem. Um, and I think, what we're doing is the alternative to that, which is to bring this down to a micro level where the person in the organization that sells the product, that knows this product, that was involved in this product all the way from its design phase through its production into when it became something to be sold. They then have this direct interaction with the owner of that product, which they then are able to maintain that connection. And then when that product is finally at the end of its use, they know better than anybody else what that product is, what its value is, how you can clean it up and make it reusable. They've got all the spare parts. They've got everything there. It's a very tight system and a very efficient system because they are on top of it. They know it. They know what's going on. Uh, and so there's still a little bit of that kind of emergency room arbitrage because when the things come back in, you do have to grade them. You do have to see what condition they're in. But you know very much what you're dealing with, right? It's like, I guess, being an emergency room that specializes in gunshot wounds. I don't know, something like that. Um, you're on top of it. You have this expectation. You have a pretty good idea of what's going to be coming in when, because you've got certain, customer behavioral patterns. You've got this communication link going. You know when things are going to be coming in. And in fact, you actually have control to an extent over what's coming in because if you need a supply of some used item because there's a surge in demand, you know who's got it, and you just go out and say, hey, we're going to jack up the buyback price just a little bit, and we're going to bring in a bigger supply of that particular product. Um, So it's a very different way of approaching it.
Oh yeah, I totally see that. Which actually brings me to another. It will bring me to another question, which I'll hold on for a second on. But the bottlenecks in terms of where is the pinch point? Where are the challenges? Is that so? What are the challenges would be on the assessment? Where are the risks operationally? Where the money could be lost, or investments could be lost, or even physically, where the products might get really stuck because there is not enough, I don't know, pairs of eyes of processing these things. So how do you classify and where those are? Because that's very interesting. And
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't see any gotchas from a supply chain standpoint to circularity. There are certainly challenges on the supply chain side, right? Because yes, you need to have some kind of system where you can evaluate these things on an even-handed basis, right? You need to have some kind of predictable metric you can use to be ranking these things. And if it's all being done by humans, humans have different interpretations of things, and they don't always rank things quite the same way. It's part of why we don't even ask the consumer to rate the quality or condition of items because it's a worthless metric. I mean, consumers have completely different ideas about what's good, what's fair, what's, it's just, we're going to have to do the evaluation anyway. So why slow down the process by asking people to rate it? I mean, we know that, from a consumer standpoint, if you even insert a question of what condition is this item in, you'll get half as many things back as you would otherwise because the consumer will just stop and they'll just go, oh, and the thing will just sit there for another, year and a half, and then it'll end up in landfill. That's just consumer nature, right? So we don't even want to ask the consumer about these things. So there are these challenges on the back end of being able to have a predictable process and putting that all in place. And but especially in a situation where you know what's coming back, you know that product really, really well, you know, it's just kind of standard things about being able to hire the right people, to put the right, production systems in place, all the kind of traditional supply chain types of issues there. I think the tough part of a circular system is on either end of that. It's figuring out how to actually get these things back in so that consumers don't just, because consumers are basically trained at this point to use something and then clear it out. Just, throw it away, whatever it is, just clear it out, right? I get a spring cleaning, I move homes, whatever I'm doing, and the big, dumpster comes out front and I throw things in there and I'm done. And changing that pattern of behavior is something we've focused on for many years now, trying to really, really understand consumer motivations and consumer trigger points, and putting things in place that make it so consumers will take that step and be thinking about that from the moment they buy something. The moment they walk into a store, they're thinking about how, what's it going to be worth when I'm done with it, and and that's part of their whole calculus when they're buying things. Is I want to have a good resale value because I'll only use this for 2 years, whatever that is. So that's a big challenge. And then the other big challenge is once you refurbish these things and put them back out there, what's the best way to actually get them into the hands of people who want to buy them? Because that system doesn't really exist much today. I mean, you've got things like, eBay, or, these kind of very kind of chaotic third party marketplaces for used things out there right now. But the idea of actually, there's no store right now where you go in and they have new and used side by side the way that, say, Amazon sells books, right? If I go to Amazon, I find the book I want, and then I have a choice. I can get a new shiny version, or I can save some money and get a used version of that book. That doesn't exist. The only place that exists in our society today is car dealerships, right? Where you've got new and used items on the same lot. And if you can't quite afford the new one, then you get the demonstrator model, or whatever it is, right? And they're all right there together. That, other than that, if you go into a store today, it is all new stuff. And if you want used stuff, you got to go to a completely different set of marketplaces to find those things. That's a super inefficient system, right? That's not the way consumers operate or think. And so those are where the real challenges are in getting a circular system.
You are listening to Chain Reaction. This podcast is brought to you by Phlox, the leading marketplace for the supply chain and logistics industry. Visit phlox.is to find out how you find the perfect supplier or make your services available to prospective buyers. Thanks for tuning in. Now back to the show.
Absolutely. Well, I think, yeah, one of the other things that actually was, as you were describing this, yeah, the other thing that occurred to me, the other industry where this is also kind of beginning to work is the mobile phones.
Yes, yes. That's the one consumer product that has, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but I think that around 30%, somewhere in there, of phones come back through.
Yeah, but for the other categories of products, whether it's brown goods, I don't know, TVs and or the white goods like dishwashers, it's not there. I mean, I'm not even talking about the clothing. Well, clothing, because they are not durable items, but yeah, no, I completely understand and the challenges. And this is actually brings me to another question, which is how the technology or and what kind of technology can potentially help. I mean, everybody talks about AI these days. AI potentially, as I can see in this circular economy kind of segment is, well, there's image recognition. There could be a lot of I don't know, databases and processing, um, assessments, toolkits. But I am obviously a kind of coming off my top of my head. But what are the technologies? How the technologies are helping you to actually get those challenges addressed, especially in identification side of things. I understand that technology might not be immediately kind of a channel, other than marketplaces dedicated to this stuff.
Sure, yeah. I mean, well, AI for us, I mean, the first place where AI is useful in what we're doing is in pricing algorithms. Because the way you price things, both the buyback price and the resale price, is critical to optimizing this whole system. And AI can be super helpful in that regard, of just bringing in all the factors, including kind of the reliability of that customer as someone who takes good or not so good care of their things and keeping track of their record and how they do. Um, and so that's kind of where the main focus for AI is for us. In terms of the back end and when something arrives, um, in our approach to circularity, identification per se isn't really required because we know what the customer is sending back. We know what's coming in before it ever arrives. So it's not like these big sorting centers we were talking about a minute ago, where it's just all a mystery. This truck dumps a bunch of things, you got to figure out what it is. And certainly AI can play a significant role, and already is beginning to play a significant role in that operation of being able to just look at something and go, what the heck is this? We don't have that issue, but we do have the issue of actually seeing what condition it's in and being able to make assessments. And that's a pretty tough challenge for AI right now. Right? It is going to evolve, and I think ultimately it's going to present some really powerful solutions. But it's pretty complicated, right? You've got to be getting images from all angles. You've got to be able to really analyze those in a concrete way. And there are a number of really great companies doing the identification part of this. I don't know of any company that's doing a really good job yet about actually, grading these things and saying what condition it's in and what the problems are, and oh, this is what's going to have to be done to this to make it reusable. It will get there, but it's just going to take a little time.
Yes, no, it's a big problem. It's quite a lot of subjectivity in this process. The other area probably of technology that I can think of is actually just simply tracking everything. Because you have different SKUs, different products, different grades, different prices, different locations, and so forth, different channels. So the tech that allows you to keep track of everything, make sure that the kind of not just the prices match, but it's the whole process, the whole flow from the gate that it comes in all the way out is being tracked. But what it also sounds to me, the way that you were describing this, I think we touched on that. It's like the mobile phones and the cars. So it sounds like the good circular economies will work well on verticals, on very kind of specific industry verticals. So as you were saying that with the companies that when the seller and even but the seller or the manufacturer or both of them know precisely what they're dealing with, um, which actually brings us to a slightly a different set of challenges. Like as a business leader, as a manufacturer, let's say I am uh, a manufacturer of brown goods, so I'm making, I don't know, coffee makers and I don't know, blenders. So I would like to sell new products and as many of them as possible because I want to grow my business. You were saying that I need to design the products so they are not just recyclable, but ideally the longevity of this product will be kind of longer. They can be repairable. Maybe some of the parts can be replaceable. But in that case, I have a bit of a trade-off. There was a term about manufactured obsolescence. So people are trying to actually, some companies are trying to manufacture products that the useful life of them is 3 years. So you throw them away or buy a brand new one. And if you're trying to make a product that either lasts longer or becomes not recyclable, becomes can enter the circular uh, cycle of life, so to speak. Now you're getting a trade-off. It's like, well, do I want to sell a new product at a higher margin, or do I want to extend the life of my existing product and potentially cut out a potential customer who may otherwise buy my brand new products? So that is quite a tricky business trade-offs, and I wonder what you hear the industry thinking on that.
Yeah, so I think you've actually just gotten to the heart of the matter.
I was holding back. Yes, thank you.
Um, because the transition to a circular economy is also a transition in the overarching objective of business. And the overarching objective of business in our world today is maximize volume. The more things we can make, the more things we sell, the better we do, right? Very, very straightforward linear equation. The driving mantra of circularity and the circular business world is maximize value. Everything that goes into that system is going to be maximized at every possible step. Every molecule that comes into that system, we're going to squeeze as much profit out of that molecule as we possibly can. That's the mindset, and that's the design of the system. And so you're not thinking in terms of, oh gosh, I'm going to cannibalize the sale of a new item because that'll mean I'm not producing as much, I'm not selling as many new things. You're thinking in terms of how do I get more value out of every single thing I'm selling? How do I squeeze that value out? And and that is absolutely the biggest roadblock from a commercial standpoint right now because when we got into this, we had a predecessor company called Stuffster, and Stuffster kind of pioneered the idea of creating a white label platform for existing brands and retailers to tap into to facilitate buyback and resale from their customers. And what we found in doing that was that they wanted to do that only insofar as it was a good marketing pitch, where they could say to customers, look at our circular, service over here, we'll buy back your item and everything else. But they had absolutely zero desire to have that service impinge on their existing business in any way, shape, or form. If there was any way that an item coming back could possibly cannibalize the sale of a new item, they would shut it down. They did not want that to happen in any way because all they knew was, no, we need to sell more stuff. We need to sell more new things. That's how, our quarterly statements go out. We've got to be able to keep those numbers going up. Um, and and what we've done with Circular Way is not just build a technology platform, but really do a lot of research into not just consumer behavior and how consumers interact with this, but what is the result of that from a business standpoint. And basically, what you find is that in a circular world, the the margins on the used products, it actually varies by industry, but in most industries, there is going to be some degradation of the gross margin because it just to bring something back, clean it up, and put it back out there is oftentimes more expensive than just taking materials and creating new products. Now, a lot of that is actually diseconomies around subsidies, around things that, kind of this whole idea of externalities, which we could talk about for hours. I could talk about for hours, but there's a lot of kind of blind subsidization that goes into making it so that it's cheaper to do things that way. Um, but the fact is that you've got a system that is going to have some lowering of the gross margins when you blend it all together with new and used being sold side by side and all that kind of thing. But what people don't realize is that you are picking up so much in everything else about your business in terms of checkout conversion rates. So if a consumer goes to a checkout screen and they realize that the 100 pounds they're about to pay for this new item, they're going to get 40 pounds back when they're done with that item. They make very, very different calculations. And we know from our research that there's a dramatic boost instantaneously in checkout conversion as soon as people understand that proposition because they just redo the math. They just calculate things differently. This doesn't cost me 100 pounds. This costs me 60 pounds. Click, right? I'm doing that. The customer loyalty of not having to continually bring in new customers because essentially in a fully circular system, everything you sell is a down payment on the next purchase. Customer buys it with the intention they're going to cash in on that item when they're done with it. And the easiest, fastest way for them to cash in is to come back to you because they could just push a button and it's there. And so you've got these huge advantages in every other aspect of your business. And what we've realized is that if you actually go all in on this system, you do way better as a business than you do in the current system. But no one realizes that because no one's ever tried it before. It's so counter to how the whole thing is structured.
I completely see what you're saying, and I'm with you on that. I think the ultimate extension of that, or not the ultimate extension, but the a more common extension of this thinking is what exactly is the car companies are doing, or the mobile phones these days. Is leasing. So you don't actually buy the item, you lease it, you rent it, and it goes back. So the vendor who sells it to you, they actually extract the value throughout the multiple cycles of usage of that item. But over time, so there's a financing involved. And I remember I was working with the automotive industries and the finance in my previous life. Uh, um, some of them were making more money through financing than through actually selling the actual products. I think it was one of the. I think it was a couple of years where General Motors was literally making absolutely no money on car sales, and all of their money on GM finance. on so, but that is one of the one of the models that it potentially can go. But I completely see exactly where you're coming from. So if I'm going into, let's say, Amazon, and I want to buy a new blender, and the blender costs, let's say, I don't know, £100, I can finance it with Klarna or someone, or I can finance it. Well, sort of not finance it, but I say, well, there's a buyback option. I'm committing to a buyback, and the seller already knows that they will get it 3 years from now or 2 years from now. So it's like it's a term use. I return it back, as you said. It's like, and I have like a down payment on the on a subsequent item, potentially from the same vendor, because it's also partially kind of the retention, whether it's enforces the brand loyalty or retention. But then we're getting back to the technical challenges of logistics and so forth. And then the businesses that are running this have to deal with all of that stuff. But I completely understand what you were saying, that if I sold your blender 3 years ago, you're going to return me back the blender. I know I deal with blenders. I know how to assess them. I know how to process them. I know how to manufacture them. I have the channels lined up for me to then use, or to get extra use of them if I can. All the way down to specialized recycling that I may have, so I disassemble them. I treat plastic separately. I don't know, copper wiring from the engine, and aluminium from somewhere that I'll put into smelting. So there's a lot of but there's a lot of complexity, and I completely understand where the challenges could be coming from. How can you touch on the global side of things? I think you mentioned at one point that actually sort of the circular economies and circular uh, uh, approaches to some categories are fairly, they're beginning to get established, let's say, in kind of the regions or national markets. But if you open up the global opportunities, uh, we know what happens with cars. I mean, sometimes we just send used cars overseas to be sold to other markets. So how can this work for other categories? Or does it work for other categories?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's some really interesting ramifications for global supply chains and what impact circularity could have on that from a number of different angles. I mean, from the standpoint of bringing products to market, if I'm now taking what was 100% new product sales and I'm converting it into, let's say 50-50. So half of what I sell is new products and half of what I sell is used, then half as many new products are getting made. Um, that has pretty clear ramifications for current global supply chains, right? Because I'm pulling in half as much raw material, I'm processing half as many things. I've cut that supply chain in half by doing this process. At the same time, I've now created this new supply chain, probably much closer to where I operate, that is working to receive, grade, clean up, polish up, put these things back in market. So I'm creating this whole new supply chain that, as I said, yeah, generally tends to be much more local, national, or regional, um, at the expense of more traditional, distant supply chains where, in the case of fashion, you've got the cotton growers and then the processors for for the fabrics, and all of those supply chains are kind of getting reduced essentially from this activity. And then these local supply chains that actually refurbish what's already there become viable and hopefully very robust. So that that has big implications. And I'm not an expert in those global supply chains, and so but I am very very aware of, concerned about that. I'm concerned about the people involved in those supply chains and how those supply chains can make that transition in the best way possible. On the other side of the equation, you've got the possibility for kind of moving things around on the resale side. So, if you think of things that have any kind of seasonality to them, be it snow blowers or fashion, you can imagine a market where, you're going to get a big influx of sellbacks at the end of that season because it's like, okay, I've worn this ski jacket, I'm done with it. I'll grow it by next year. I'll sell it back now. Um, and there could be enormous value in supply chains that move these things from northern to southern hemisphere or whatever to go to where that seasonal market is. I mean, I think it's just one example, but you've got these new things opening up that haven't really existed before. And so there's some really interesting supply chain channels that I think are going to come into being that begin to work on this.
I completely see the emergence of different business models that could be centered around kind of the rentals and the movements, as you said, yeah, moving north to south and getting into seasons and so forth. So, I mean, there's a lot of fascinating opportunities, absolutely, and I'm sure that there will be lots of genius people that will be coming up with all sorts of things, and definitely it will have implications on the logistics and the way that we actually view purchasing from kind of going forward. It's a fascinating subject. I mean, we've already been talking for 45 minutes, and but it's great, and there's a lot of unpack, and there's lots of new things. But one of the things that I'd like to one of the ways with which I like to kind of wrap up the conversations is. I'd like to come back to the kind of the challenges that you mentioned and specifically, but overall in the business, not necessarily just in logistics. And a question that I love asking all my guests is, if you had a magic wand, and if you can wave it and remove one major obstacle or a problem that is either slowing the adoption of the circular economy or the circular processes, or some of the bottlenecks that we mentioned, or something that restricts the adoption, the growth of the model or evolution of the models. What would that be?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, can I have two answers to that question?
Of course,
Okay.
please.
Okay. So, I think the first thing is that the kind of transformation that we're talking about is so massive, right? And I think, ultimately it can be summarized in that transition from a maximized value to a maximized volume to a maximized value mindset and operational kind of, mantra within business, right? That is just such a fundamental shift in how things happen and how we operate right now that it's very challenging even to get the capital coming in for this until someone's actually done it and shown what this looks like. Um, and so, capital tends to flow in very incremental ways, unless it's like some big tech breakthrough like AI, where nobody really knows where it's going, but by gosh, I better get some money in there and get my stake in this because everybody's talking about it's going to go someplace big, and so I better not miss out on it. Um, and that will come ultimately with circularity, but it's still early. It's still early, and so even the beginning of our conversation, I mean, the statistics I threw at you were kind of shocking to you because nobody realizes that this is the problem, right? But I think everybody kind of recognizes that once you make this transformation, it can take hold in society very, very quickly. It's kind of like think about going into a Toyota dealer because you're talking about cars, right? Walk into a Toyota dealer that says, "Hey, we don't do any trade-ins here. We just take cash. We don't have any used cars. We only sell new cars, and we don't have a service department. We don't have a parts department. We don't do financing. You're on your own," right? You're never going to shop at that Toyota dealer. It's just never going to happen. And so, as soon as people actually realize that they're basically losing out on all this value that they could be capturing just by, pushing a button when they're done using something, they're not going to tolerate players that don't do that anymore. So I think that transformation is going to come very, very quickly when it comes, but it's still very early, and so getting some financing. So that's my first one. Second one, I just on a regulatory standpoint, we talked some about the kind of gravitational pull of big back end systems and trying to just do collections and sorting centers and all that kind of thing. And you can take these same policies around things like the extended producer responsibility, and you can structure those in a way that just supercharge everything we've been talking about. Where essentially any brand or retailer that designs its products to be reused, that sells those products in a way that guarantees they're going to come back in and be repurposed and put back out there. If those organizations are getting the benefit of those fees being collected through the extended producer responsibility laws, you're going to you're going to hypercharge the growth of everything we've talked about because you can just now completely change the playing field. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and I think with on the government side, we tend to be looking more at penalizing something rather than incentivizing something, and I think that they can certainly add a bit more of that mindset. I mean, no, John, thank you for joining the conversation, thank you for sharing your perspective, and it's an absolutely fascinating discussion. It's a great topic, and I totally see that we are early on, and there's a lot of different models and different opportunities going to come out of that. Thank you for being a great guest.
Well, thank you again for having me.
And to everyone who's still listening, thank you again for watching. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for staying with us for that long. I hope you found the episode as insightful and interesting, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode of Chain Reaction Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to Chain Reaction. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have a story or insights to share from your sector, we'd love to hear from you. Simply reach out to us through the links in the description. See you next time.